I'd love the panel's comments on two extraordinary recent episodes which offer contrasting pictures. The Bo Xilai episode, what the hell is that about? And the Wukan village uprising. Wukan, the village uprising in Wukan. What do these two stories tell us?
大家好，我是老吴。上一期节目我们一起重温了2012年裴敏欣教授和李世默先生就中国模式和未来走向展开的精彩辩论。裴敏欣从西方视角出发，对中国体制的潜在风险和危机发出了预警，而李世默则针锋相对，强调了中国模式的韧性和独特优势。那么在他们各自阐述完核心观点之后，现场的观众又会提出哪些尖锐的问题？面对这些来自不同角度的挑战，裴敏欣和李世默又将如何回应和辩护？这一期我们就接着来看这场辩论的下半场精彩的问答环节。在接下来的问答中，有观众会直接质疑中国体制的正义性、精英治国的成色，还会提到当时震惊中外的两个具体事件。这里我先给大家简单交代一下背景，有些观众可能并不知道。一个是薄熙来事件，薄熙来曾是中国政坛一颗耀眼的政治明星，担任过重要职务，一度被视为有望进入最高领导层，但在2012年前后，他突然陷入政治漩涡。他的妻子古开来涉及谋杀英国商人海伍德，薄熙来本人也因一系列严重的违法违纪问题被调查和免职，最终被判处无期徒刑。这起事件因其涉及高层权力斗争和戏剧性的情节，引发了全球的广泛关注。另一个是乌坎村事件，这是2011年发生在中国广东省的一个群体性事件。乌坎村的村民因为土地被村干部私下非法变卖，以及对村委会选举不公平等问题长期不满，发起了大规模的集体抗议，一度将村委会和警察赶出村庄，实现了短暂的村民自治。这个事件后来通过谈判和重新选举得到了一定程度的解决，但也暴露了中国基层治理和土地问题的一些深层矛盾。好，了解了这两个背景，我们再来听听现场观众是如何将这些现实案例抛给两位嘉宾，而他们又是如何回应的。
Thank you. I'm Spencer Ackerman. I'm a writer with Wired. I'm less interested in the durability of the Chinese system than I am in its justice. Eric, is material wealth the only virtue we should seek to look for to measure the system? Is there not a room for political liberty? Is there not a room to say that there are certain things by virtue of an inherent value of the individual that the state cannot do to them? And I feel compelled to just give a quick anecdote because of all the poll data you cited. I remember being in Iraq and hearing a lot of poll data about how happy the Iraqis were and how faithful and optimistic they were in their future during the Iraqi civil war.
I think the idea of political liberty is based on the idea of rights. The individual has some kind of unalienable rights to exercise them. And my challenge to you is, where do you think these rights come from? From whom? Who says? Says who? Your answer has to be God.
I don't believe that's
Okay, so if it's from men, then these rights could be negotiated, could be increased, reduced, based on circumstances of society, right? If you think those rights are absolute, you have to claim some kind of authority above man. Otherwise, where do they come from? I mean, you're shaking your head. So where would they come from? If they're coming, great. So men ought to talk about it and negotiate. So they're not absolute. If they're from men, they're not absolute. I mean, the question implies that there's some kind of absolute degree of rights. But I just don't think that's
so Minxin, stipulating this is an enormous question we've opened, I invite a quick response from you, if you want.
I would say let's follow the golden mean, okay? I don't know what rights are in absolute terms, but I want to follow one very simple rule, is that I would do, and Confucius actually has said, Confucius said the same thing, the golden mean. I do not want to be treated, I want to have the same, if I want to enjoy the same rights, I want other people to respect these rights, and I will do the same in return. I think this is the minimum. So if I want to enjoy free speech, I will reciprocate the respect for free speech. If I want to enjoy my secure property rights, I want to respect other people. I ask for no more, no less. But in a non-democratic society, what you have is there are two classes of people. There's this very small privileged elite that wants all the rights in the world to themselves. These are the privileges. And then they deny the same rights to other people simply because they don't have the political power.
Yes, in the yellow shirt on the aisle, and then we'll go here and here. And so I'll try to get as many people. The shorter the questions, the shorter the answers, the more we can do.
Eric, my question is, if you look at Taiwan and Korea, after the wars, they were bankrupt, they were military dictatorships, but when they got to the middle class, they became democracies.
Yes.
China has gone through the same thing. The internet exists, you can try to shut it down, but you can't. I would say the Chinese system at this point is doomed unless you want to be North Korea.
Well, good question. If you look at the few success stories of non-Western developing countries who achieved first world status in the last few decades, almost all of them did so under authoritarian regimes or some form of one-party rule, Japan. All right? So Singapore, South Korea, all of them. And some of them adopted electoral democracies after they became wealthy. But it's only been barely a generation since they did so. And I would caution us from passing judgments so quickly and with so much confidence that it's working for them. It's been merely 10, 20 years. In Taiwan, the only elected former president is in jail for corruption. The only one. In South Korea, half of them had either been sent to jail for corruption or committed suicide because he was about to be sent to jail. All right?
It's a sign of democratic success. Once China has a president in jail, then the country has arrived.
Yes, many people will say
democracy is working when its presidents are in jail.
Democracy is working when they keep electing presidents that will end up in jail. I mean, that's not a good bar. But anyway, I think it's too early to pass judgment.
So we have two questions up here. I'll ask you two gentlemen, one after the other, to ask your questions if you could. So first in the second row and then right in front. Yes.
Khan Ross is my name. I'd love the panel's comments on two extraordinary recent episodes which offer contrasting pictures. The Bo Xilai episode, what the hell is that about? And the Wukan village uprising. Wukan, the village uprising in Wukan. What do these two stories tell us?
Yeah. And yes, I mean, can you follow on to add your question too?
It's actually completely different, but I basically wanted to say that probably politically I'm closer to you than to my friend Eric. However, I find myself moving closer to Eric in recent times because we should differentiate, I think, between just formal democracy and the true practice of democracy. And I will say what you have in most of the world, when you cite the example of 120 countries, countries that democracies in name, such as my country, Nigeria, because if you can pay somebody $5 to vote for Eric and not for you, then you cannot reasonably call it a democracy. So we should be very careful about how we use this kind of data to make assessments.
So on the table, formal democracy, the village uprising, Bo Xilai.
Yeah. The two incidents actually show the system in distress. In the Bo Xilai case, this is a very powerful politician who was supposed to be promoted to be one of the top 9 people governing China. And all of a sudden, he was purged because his wife allegedly murdered somebody or was involved in murder. Whether he had anything to do with it remains shrouded in secrecy. Then this Wukan case, where villagers really staged a collective uprising. They surrounded the village, barricaded the village, 30,000 people demanding some sort of justice. And the government thankfully handled it in a very rational way and avoided bloodshed. But the strain in society remains because it's not an isolated episode. Where the formal democracy and what political scientists call quality of democracy. But you cannot aspire to be a high-quality democracy right away. Actually, Nigeria is not considered a full democracy. It's considered a partial democracy. But the quality is very low. Yeah.
So Eric, especially on these two episodes, Bo Xilai and the village.
Bo Xilai, what can I say? Macbeth, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Incredible incident. Does it show the system is strained? Yes, of course. But let me again remind you, the system had been under much greater strain. The First Lady of the People's Republic was sentenced to death. Sentenced to death. Mao's wife. What kind of strain was that? But the one-party system moved on and succeeded. Wukan village, of course, corruption. Villagers get pissed. They uprising and get fixed. So what do you expect from a country of 1.3 billion people experiencing the largest scale, most rapid transformation mankind has ever seen? All right, 1.3 billion. Let me give you, during the Chinese New Year, more people move, more people move than countries. Okay, think about, so what do you expect from a country that's urbanizing at a scale and rapidity unparalleled in human history by far? So of course, Wukan, you expect more, I expect more Wukans in the next 10, 20 years. Doesn't mean the system will collapse.
Yes, gentleman here in the front row in the blue shirt, and then we'll go to the two behind you after that.
Thank you. I'm David Jones, also a venture capitalist, but my question is for Professor Pei. I first lived in China in the early 80s, and there's no question in my mind that Eric is 100% right about the degree of change that has occurred within China, within the way it's governed itself. In those years, people couldn't choose their own jobs, they couldn't choose who to marry, etc. The changes have been fantastic. Deng Xiaoping's famous cat has caught the mice, right? I'm curious why you think we're at the point of change now. You cite outside statistics from other countries, but what about China? Says it's time for the big inflection.
We look at the economic side. Well, let me just pick up the forces that drove China's rapid economic growth. The benign factors are either disappearing or have disappeared. You look at demographics, you look at export growth, you look at the role of investments in the economy. It's a highly unbalanced economy. And if the imbalances continue, economic growth is not going to be as good as before. So that will bring about a lot of pressure on the political system. Then you look at some of the social indicators. It's a completely different society compared with the 80s. Urbanization, early 80s was under 20%. Now it's 50%. When you have more than 50% of the people living in cities, it's much more difficult to maintain a one-party system because the so-called organizing, the cost for organizing political action dramatically dropped. And then you factor in communications revolution, the information revolution. And then you look at the growth in college-educated demographics. Today, China produces 7 million college graduates a year. Only 1 million can be admitted into the Communist Party. So you leave outside the Communist Party 6 million highly educated, highly ambitious, but highly frustrated people. You don't need 6 million to rise up against the party. All you need is about 5%. Just do your math over the next 10, 15 years. So we look at social economic factors. You would say that this probably is a system that is not going to be able to deal with these changes without opening up the channels for political participation, because you cannot tell highly educated Chinese that trust the party. The party will do the right thing for you. They're not going to take that for granted.
Do you want to make a short reply, Eric?
I actually think the 7 million and 1 million number is a great number. it actually shows the Chinese Communist Party is highly competitive, highly selective, it's highly attractive to the best and the brightest young people of the country. They compete to join, and it's highly meritocratic, and that's the foundation of the party's success. And to say that 6 million are left behind that couldn't join is like saying, vast majority of college graduates in America cannot make it to Wall Street, and they're going to rebel. I don't think that's the case. Secondly, yes, I agree with Minxin that we need more. The society is becoming more complex, so there will be more plurality. Yet, I think the party as an institution has proven itself to be highly flexible. It's becoming more and more inclusive. At the beginning, it was a proletarian party. Think about that, Leninist party, only workers. And they were shooting even farmers who were just rich farmers, not even landlords. Today, they had the theory of the three represents. I won't bore you with the details. But essentially it says capitalists could join the party. Of course, only if I applied, but never heard back. But think about that. Entrepreneurs, and then one more point, sorry, about the point about the China's economic success was due to benign forces. I don't think that's the case. China's economic success is based on the extraordinary vitality and inventiveness of the Chinese people. It's the most entrepreneurial society, most entrepreneurial economy in the world today. I'm a venture capitalist, I know it. The most successful internet IPOs in the United States on NASDAQ, New York, have been Chinese companies in the last 5 years. Two biggest ones, Baidu and Youku, Chinese companies. Okay, so and small businesses are being started every single day. That's the source of China's economic success.
So we have about 10 more minutes here. I'm going to start taking questions in batches of 3. So I think there are a couple of people here. So if the microphone of 2 or 3, I see 3 questions right here. So 1, 2, 3. Yes.
I went to a lecture on Confucianism a couple days ago, and the lecturer referred to Confucianism as the soft face of the Communist Party, with some admitted cynicism. Could you please explain to me a little bit better how you see that comment reflected in communist society for me? We're visiting China.
Good.
And I'm trying to get a preliminary understanding.
Good. Confucianism and communism. Question 1. Yes.
My question has 2 parts. That is there a ideas festival in China? And part 2 is, could this conversation take place in Beijing?
Interesting. And back there now in the purple shirt.
Hi, this is directed to Dr. Li. I'm wondering if you could explain a bit more what you think are the strengths of the Chinese system, the non-democratic system. So why is it more efficient and better for China? You suggested one area where the membership of the party is very competitive, so I guess you get elites in that. But I'd like to learn what kind of lessons we can learn from that.
So 3 quick topics on the table: Confucianism, free expression like Ideas Festival, and the actual virtues of one-party rule.
I think Confucianism is important. I think the Chinese Communist Party is fundamentally a Confucian organization. It'll take a book to explain that. But that's why I think Marxism found fertile soil in China, because there is a commonality between the Marxist ideal, communist ideal of egalitarianism, not equality, egalitarianism, in the Confucian ideal of egalitarianism. Second, this kind of conversation, I think this particular conversation can take place in Beijing, but I don't want to take away from a point. Many conversations cannot. And I want to break the spell of the so-called freedom of speech, which is taken as a given. And I don't think it should be taken as a given. Speech, it's based on the assumption that speech, unlike acts, cannot harm. So people ought to be allowed to speak anything they want. But speech has harmed since time immemorial. Speech is act. And I think human societies have a responsibility to manage and regulate speech. Just like in Germany, Mein Kampf cannot be published because of the unique history of Germany. Okay? So I think there's no absolute freedom of speech. Third answer, I think that one of the most important key to the success of the Chinese system is meritocracy, upward mobility within the political system. So if we look at, for instance, the Politburo, the highest ruling body of the country, there are 25 of us, of them.
3 of them are here.
Freudian slip. 25 members of the Politburo. Only 5 of them come from any background of privilege, whether it's power or wealth. Only 5. 20 of them, including the president and the prime minister, came from completely ordinary backgrounds. Some are very, very poor. In one generation, they rose all the way to the top. Compare that with the US Senate. How many are sons of senators? How many are sons of millionaires? You know? And if you look at the larger central committee of 300 people, the percentage of people that come from backgrounds of privilege is even smaller. So upward mobility, that in one generation you could come from nowhere and become president.
So mention Confucianism, free speech, and meritocracy.
Well, I would say that when the Leninist party trying to do Confucianism, you know, something is very wrong, either with Confucianism or with Leninism. So that's the answer to that. The other is the Ideas Festival. I think this conversation can take place in Beijing, but the US government will have to come and rescue me right afterwards. Thirdly is that I would say the idea of China as a meritocracy is a myth. Because we know, how do these people actually get promoted? Do we know the process? Do we know the criteria? Did they take an exam? Did they open up their administrative record for public scrutiny, for comparison? Why is Comrade Zhang get promoted, but not Comrade Li, even if they have exactly exact same record? So it's there's a recent political science study done on Central Committee members and try to see how they get actually promoted. What they found is that no objective criteria can explain their promotion. Nothing like economic growth. It's all personal patronage. So I talk about the US Senate. It may not be a meritocracy, but at least it's a democracy.
So we have one more crop of questions. Anybody? Yes, back there. So how about back there? We'll start with you, and then these 2 people here. That'll be our last. And we'll make it 4. Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm John Hewitt. So just regarding your point on the breadth and just complete quick expansion that has occurred in China in the last few years under the one-party system, I agree with you that there can be a lot of stagnation occurring in a 2-party system, especially when you have a Democratic president and a Republican Congress. But there has to be something said for watchdog accountability. Who holds a one-party system accountable for their actions?
Accountability. Next question. Okay, who's down here? Somebody had a hand up? Yes. Yes, first in the yellow, then the play.
What effect has the change in demographics from the older generations and the cultural change with this gentrification?
Accountability, demographics, yes, sir? And then we'll have one more over here.
Dr. Li, what are the unique factors in Chinese culture and history that support your view? And then what would be the unique factors in Chinese culture and history that would indicate that you could have a transformation to some type, but different probably than our form of democracy?
Great. Thank you. And one more over here. This is going to be a 4-part bonus round robin.
Eric, when do you think the Communist Party in China will stop monitoring what people read on the internet? And don't you think it'll have some inhibiting effect on an economy that's based on sharing information?
So accountability, demographics, unique Chinese culture, and monitoring the internet. Who would like to go first? Eric.
Accountability is a good question, and that's one aspect that needs a lot of improvement. They need to design institutional changes to increase accountability. Not to say they don't have accountability. They have a lot of internal accountability. And similar to when Minxin talked about the promotion, it's, I think just because there are no standards that are public that you could see, or no accountability that you could see, doesn't mean there is no objective standard, there's no accountability, because it's opaque. And I like to also talk about opacity and transparency. In today's discourse, transparency is held up at the altar and say it's an inherent good. And opacity is an inherent bad. I disagree with that. I think there can be constructive opacity. There can also be destructive transparency. I think the Western democracies are suffering from destructive transparency. Everything is so transparent, the system gets completely captive of special interests, manipulating the people. China is actually been benefiting from constructive opacity. People can make decisions thinking of the long-term future of the nation instead of meeting quarterly earnings demands like corporations in America have to do, and that's a big problem. Second question.
Demographics.
Demographics is interesting. I actually think the demographic changes, the younger generation are becoming more supportive of the current system. They're benefiting from it, and they're becoming more and more nationalistic, which I'm not sure whether that's all good. But younger generations are becoming more and more nationalistic, and nationalism is one major, not the only, but one major source of legitimacy of the party.
Unique Chinese culture.
Unique Chinese cultures, I think, I like to use the word, there's a Chinese term called 统治, which is translated into English as rule or govern, okay? But in the very word, in that very term in Chinese, 统治, the word actually means unified rule by one authority, unified authority. You actually cannot have a Chinese word that says govern or rule without the meaning of unified authority. And therefore, that's why I think the one-party system has cultural resonance and will survive for some time.
And finally, internet censorship.
Internet censorship, yes, it won't stop. Will it? And I'll refer to my earlier comments about freedom of speech. Second, will it affect economic growth? It hasn't so far.
Thank you. So, mention accountability, demographics, unique Chinese culture, and the internet.
Well, I would say accountability, you cannot rely on a one-party system to enforce accountability on itself. But it's going to happen in China anyway because of one thing. The Chinese people are paying a lot of taxes, and they want to see how their tax dollars are spent. So you're seeing this bottom-up efforts to enforce accountability, at least on one issue. Budget. Yeah. So that's one. Transparency actually will be introduced into China. And second, demographics, I think the one real issue is how are you going to support a rapidly aging population in China with middle income, with underdeveloped financial institutions. This is a huge economic problem for China. And third is unique Chinese culture. Here I agree with Eric about one thing, is that if I look at the future of China, identify one possible factor that can derail China's movement to a more democratic system, that's nationalism. Because once nationalism can be very anti-democratic. And if the ruling elites manipulate nationalism, then that can work to their favor. Internet censorship, I think it's a futile effort. It's inconveniencing other people. In this book, there's this app, there is a piece of data. I've read the book that censorship, internet censorship, inconveniences a lot of people, even though it targets a very, very small number of activists. It's a totally unhealthy situation. Maybe it has not slowed down the Chinese economy, but I'm sure it has already done a lot of damage to Chinese people. If you ask a Chinese citizen whether he would like to have a faster internet connection, free access to Facebook, I'm sure the answer is yes.
We're at the end of our time. Before I ask you to join me in thanking our extraordinary speakers, I'm going to do something which is a little unusual. I'm not going to ask you which side you agree with, because we assume this is America. More people would be on Minxin Pei's side. I'm going to take a poll of who has changed his or her mind by the virtue of what you've heard for the last hour plus. So I'm going to do a show of hands. People who have changed their mind from what you thought coming in here to agree more with Minxin Pei after the basis of what you've heard. How many people have changed your minds to agree more with Eric Lee through the course of this discussion? Interesting. Interesting. So I think we have a plurality on Eric Lee's side,
Oh, yeah.
I believe, or at least a very, very close division. So there's much more to discuss here. I am really grateful to Minxin Pei and Eric Lee. Please join me in thanking them.
好，裴敏欣和李世默先生的这场精彩问答，我们就全部看完了。可以说，问答环节的交锋丝毫不逊于他们各自的开篇陈述。现场观众提出的问题非常尖锐，也很有代表性，涵盖了从政治自由、权利来源到民主模式的适用性，还有中共体制的优劣，再到具体的社会事件，如薄熙来案和乌坎村事件等等。面对这些挑战，裴敏欣依然坚持他对中国体制潜在风险的担忧，并从西方民主的理念出发，对一党制下的问责和权力制约问题提出了质疑。而李世默则继续以其独特的视角，强调中国模式的实践成果和文化根源，并对西方民主模式的普适性以及其在当下所面临的困境进行了有力的反驳。他提出的建设性不透明、精英治国等观点确实引人深思。这场辩论虽然发生在10多年前，但其中探讨的许多核心问题，有一党制的可持续性、国家治理模式的选择以及中西方价值观的差异等等，在今天看来依然具有非常强的现实意义。特别是当我们结合过去10多年世界格局的变化以及中国自身发展的轨迹，再来回味这场辩论，或许更能体会到其中观点的碰撞和思想的深度。谁的预判更接近现实，哪种模式更具生命力？这场辩论无疑为我们提供了极其宝贵的思考素材。好，今天的分享就到这里，感谢大家的收看，我们下次再见。